Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're at. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, good. So the idea here with this this evening theory is not to drop things, except you might want to drop your preconceptions if you can. That might be harder. That's why I'm here. So the title for tonight's Dharma talk is Be with All Things, otherwise known as the vow of the bodhisattva to save all beings. Simply put, it's be with all things. And the reason it's put that way, my understanding and why I like to use that particular one is you've got to start somewhere. And you might as well just be with the stuff that's arising in your mind stream. Oh, Ondo, did you get a haircut? Thought I wouldn't notice, huh? So it's hard to do because especially we don't have a practice, then it's hard to not buy into or believe the stuff that's arising in our mind that is triggered by something out there, someone else, or our own life, or possibly we don't even see a trigger. We just notice that we wake up in the morning and this doesn't feel so good. I don't feel good today. And so instead of just looking at the emotion, the feeling, the quality, the texture of that disturbance, shall we say, which is even going a little bit too far to say that, we call it something. We call it depression, or we call it, and then other people buy into that. And then other people say, perhaps they say they have depression or they have negative feelings or so on. And we all think we're experiencing the same thing. Probably not. So why would we say be with all things when some things are crappy? Be with it anyway. The idea here is a spiritual path is about seeing deeply for yourself what is fundamentally true, what is fundamentally important or true. We need to see that ourselves rather than have someone tell us, including a meditation teacher, Dharma teacher, or anyone really. Anyone else, your mom, your dad are going to be able to tell you a few things, but might be good for you to see it yourself. Not easy. Be with all things. So the idea here is to, the more elaborate way of saying this, more personal, is to save all beings. Another way of saying that is to put everyone before yourself, to put other people's welfare, what other people want before what you want. That's also a vow that we observe or receive in the Mahayana path, the path of the bodhisattva. Bodhi means awake, sattva means being. It means been translated different ways, but enlightening being, or a being who is on a journey to attain complete clarity about the nature of themselves and of the universe and of everything. What is this? So it seems to be necessary to have a practice where you are watching what is showing up and what is passing away. What is you're able to you could say accommodate or receive, and that which, no matter how hard you try, you keep turning away, keep adding on to it. Something shows up you don't like, you immediately jump to whatever is available. Could be blaming someone else, or there I go again. Just to say, there I go again is a way of adding on, because it validates that as something that actually is occurring, that will occur again. You just said so. There I go again. There I go again. There I go again. So we give it a kind of a mini credential for being somehow valid. We validate that. If you just receive it, it can't collect a credential. It can't pass go and collect $200. It can't get any grip on the relative mind if you don't do anything with it, but just have, you could say, an attitude of just receive, just an open dimension where you're just an observer. You're watching the emotions and thoughts come towards you. You watch your ideas and your projections go towards those things possibly, but you don't do anything with it, nothing to correct. So it's not about correcting it. It's about just be with all things. It may be things that are coming towards you. It may be the way you're adding on to things, which you may be trying to stop. So it doesn't seem to respect the polarity of the self-centered mind that wants some things and doesn't want others. It's a vow that actually transcends, as has been said in the past, transcends karma, transcends it. Well, how does it transcend it? It doesn't disagree with it. It doesn't agree with it, and it doesn't ignore it. It transcends it. And in order to practice this, it seems necessary to have a meditation practice where you bring yourself to the cushion, wherever you're sitting, and to watch the way you continue to object to that, the way you continue to move away, the way you continue, or I continue to agree with some things, disagree with other things, and sort other things out and try to reshape them or make them so it's easier to accept that, or it's or somehow we've got that handle, or now that's going to go away because now I've just accepted the blame or the credit. Anything you do with anything that is arising out of some kind of preference for one thing and a preference, a consideration you want something else to stop, this is called a relative truth. And relatively, it functions that way. It is relatively true. It is relatively false. But it doesn't look at the larger picture, the bigger picture of everything. It doesn't look at the entirety of the situation, which is not located or fastened to or have allegiance to this particular lifetime that we're living. Much wider than that. It's so the awareness that begins to see that and understand that is sometimes called a maha, or great maha vipassana, or great panoramic awareness. And even that is maybe not a complete description of it. So for each person's experience of sit down, hold still, watch the movement of what is coming and going in the mind stream, each person is going to have a different take on it, or a different challenge, or a different kind of obstacles that will arise there. And the recommendation is to don't do anything. Don't do anything with it. Keep it very minimalist. Don't push, don't pull, don't look away. And if something is arising in the mind stream that is difficult or challenging, and we tend to just spontaneously react to it, or go into some kind of a thought pattern around there that is again, and I don't know why that won't go away. Those kinds of chatterings, those of you who have done some sitting meditation know about those. And I would say those are spontaneously risen. It's not much different than the situation that arose as the depression, or as the difficulty, or as the challenge, as the bad feeling, even though you added to it. And I said, or someone said, don't add, don't subtract, don't divide, do nothing with it, just receive it. If you can just receive, give it your attention, whatever's moving, give it your attention, just receive. But if you can't, if you find yourself leaping out of your chair, or leaping out of your mind stream into pushing, into validating or blaming, then just observe that. So we're always returning to the basic idea of receiving, even though that receiving may not be the first opportunity to just receive. Whatever arises, just receive. Whatever, if you receive it, it doesn't hang around. It's like being an invisible person in an empty house with no doors and no windows. The whatever comes, it just comes through and it passes right on through. It keeps on going. But if you do anything with it, it hangs around and creates more disturbance, more chaos. No guarantee. So if you do this and you feel like, well, this isn't working for me, well, maybe it's not. But it seems necessary to do a lot of it. Any questions yet? Go ahead.
When you're bowing, you just said that you may think this is not working for me. If this path is one of no progress, what is it to have something, a path work for us?
I think it'll show up different for each person. For me, the way it worked for me to say it's working is my dedication to my teacher. Is my you could say trust in him. I'm not recommending you trust me, not recommending you trust anybody. I would even say don't trust anybody. Don't trust me, don't trust him. Believe anything, don't believe anybody at all. But it's dependent on your business. You may have a connection with someone where you might need to do that. But it doesn't need to be some kind of a command where you have to believe what I'm saying. I often say over and over again, don't believe a word I'm saying. But if something that I am saying resonates with you, then maybe you might want to consider it. I try to be as respectful as I can, because I don't want to, not trying to convert anybody to anything. I would say, in order for me, the way I am wired, you could say, for me to help anybody, I have to really respect their confusion, not try to correct it or fix it or get them to do anything, including meditate. That may be applicable to others, but it may not be. More?
You're bowing. So again, this path can be disappointing or take a long time. You say often that it could take years.
It can.
So how can we stay inspired by this path if it looks like it's going to take years?
This is one reason we have all the conceptual aspects of the Buddha's Dharma, 2,500 years of people looking at what the Buddha said and deconstructing that in different ways. There are various people who have practiced and have understood something deeply about the teachings of the Buddha, have been able to talk about it in different ways. Vasubandhu, Asanga, Dogen Zenji, and current teachers. My teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, has, 10 volumes where he talked a lot in describing different aspects of the Buddhist path. So studying that way, this is something we do every day. I don't know, what is there, 12 different book studies where we come together as a Sangha, as a community, a spiritual community, and look at what someone said in the 13th century or the 9th century, or further back than that, or the words of the Buddha himself, the apparent words of the Buddha, and we discuss that. We look at what has been said and see how that works with the practice that we're doing, our awareness practice, and our practice in relating to the teaching person, in this case, this person. And I would say, don't do anything unless you have to. If this is not working, do something else. And when I say working, I just mean some understanding or some inspiration that you need to keep doing this. It may not show up, the spiritual path may not show up as like what in the monk talks here, was it last Saturday? Was it last Saturday? We gave a talk on the 10 bhumis, or the 10 stages or grounds, bodhisattva grounds, or the way sometimes the path of the bodhisattva is described in terms of those grounds. And so I think it shows up different for different people. Some people want to align themselves or commit themselves to this path more deeply. They become monks, or they might receive lay precepts or jukai, the 16 precepts there, and the 3 pure precepts are do good, don't do harm, simply put, nothing complicated there, and be with all things, or save all beings, put others before yourself. And a lot of the putting others before yourselves can show up as not really being able to do that, because some people are just harder to put because they're bad people, or because their confusion is more abrasive to you. So because they're so confused, then we can't quite do that. So it's about observing that, being aware of that, not necessarily having some kind of accomplishment where you've done that. The intention is what is important. intention to be with all things, not actually being with all things. Actually, you can't actually be with all things, because the ultimate understanding is there isn't anyone separate. We have to start somewhere. So we start working with the relative aspect, relative bodhisattva, or trying to actually, based on the way relative truth looks, is trying to work with that. If you read in Atisha's 7 points of mind training, there's a big elaborate, 59 slogans covering relative bodhicitta, in other words, help people, and absolute bodhicitta, because there aren't any people to help. Everything is an illusion. So when you read that kind of material, and there's more of that all over the place, when you read that, you find your own way of relating to that. Some of those slogans may not resonate with you at all, and others may speak to you. Like, of the two, keep the principal witness. Of you and everyone else, stay with what this looks like to you. Another one is absolute bodhicitta would be always be a child of illusion. Everything is unreal. It's real, and it has a sense of being real, just like a dream is real when you're dreaming it. When you wake up, it's not even sure why you would even think that was real, because it was so bizarre. This is pretty bizarre right here. Questions are good if you have them. Yes, Shoto.
Shoto bowing. What is it to keep the principal witness when working with a teacher?
Keep the principal witness is to trust in what's happening with you. You already have the relationship to the teacher, and you will know if you have a close relationship to the teacher if you need to bring something to the teacher or not. You don't have to come to the teacher about everything. More?
Shoto bowing. I guess to me, it looks like it could be interpreted as not giving the teacher the benefit of the doubt, like to keep the principal witness when working with the teacher.
You want help with that?
Yeah.
Don't do that. You will know if you have a teacher, which I'm not here marketing myself or anyone else, but if you have a teacher, you'll know when that applies. You will know that. More? Further questions? Anyone on Zoom out there and wherever you guys are at?
Cheese on bowing. When you say that you will know that, will that show up as knowledge, bowing?
Yes. You just know that. Is that Semi? That's Semi. Yeah. Hi, Semi. Anyone else have a question?
Shokabang,
Okay.
what is the difference between believing the teacher and trusting the teacher?
Good. Trusting the teacher is to not necessarily take what the teacher says or does and turn it into something else just because you can. Even though being there may not feel particularly secure, just do it anyway. Or not, or do something else. More, let's go further into that. There's more to be said about that. If you have the question.
Shokabang, when we're confused, how can we receive what you're saying without turning it into something else?
Just see that you do that. If you abandon what is arising for something else, it's about the awareness that is what is happening, not stopping yourself or controlling yourself so you don't do that. Even though the teaching would be, don't do that. But just like I say, I sometimes say, don't add. But I know you can't help but add. But if I say don't add, then your awareness about the way in which you're adding things or taking something that arises and adding something to it, it must be this, it must be that. Then that becomes more clear. The awareness about the adding is more in your perception. So don't add, but there's the addition.
Shokubowing.
Yes, Shoka.
What is received when we don't turn it into something else?
The truth. You actually receive the truth, which is nothing is separate from anything else. And once that has been received, there isn't anything else to receive. Shoto.
If we have a true teacher, is the teacher also the principal witness?
I wouldn't get too fancy. I mean, you can go in there and then we start separating what's true and what's not true. But it's the slogan is for you. Of the two, keep the principal witness. It's basically talking about your relationship to to the world and to everything. It's not taking the teaching person out of the loop particularly. If you have a teacher, then you might want to talk to the teacher about whatever's happening to you. But when you're any other situation, you might be looking at things going this way, things going that way. Might want to consider your own understanding. So it's just a way of talking about it. It doesn't mean you have to believe your thoughts. And like that person, I have to believe my thoughts about that because I'm supposed to keep the principal witness. So therefore, I don't consider or listen to anyone, what anyone is saying. I'm always the one who is right. Or it's a slogan, so it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to, use that to ward off things that are out of your control. Sure.
What should we do with the teacher's instruction?
Consider it. You having trouble with that?
The talks from Saturday just had a few people bring up that teacher dynamic. So I've been pretty curious about wanting to go deeper into that personally.
Yeah. Each person has their relationship to the teacher. The spiritual teacher is depending on the culture it's in, gets really intense. Whatever in ancient Tibet, it was whatever the teacher commands, that I will do. So there was no, I don't know how they fit in, keep the principal witness there. Maybe it was the teacher in that situation. And in ancient times, it was more about just putting the teacher ahead of everything. In this particular cultural situation here, where I had a Tibetan teacher and a Zen teacher, both from different cultures. This is this culture here. So less locking down on whatever is showing up on a form or right or wrong, and more about let's look at it. Let's see what this is. Fundamentally, let's watch, let's observe, let's receive whatever is happening without jumping to necessarily to a conclusion about who's right, who's wrong, what should I do, what shouldn't I do. You've been here for a few years. You having any difficulty in that area? Do you feel like the teacher is ordering you around, telling you what to do? No. Was anyone here feel like that? Any of you monks, especially? So why even have a teacher then? What is the teacher doing? What is the teacher doing right now?
Sure.
You gonna answer that?
I had a question around it.
Wait a minute. You want to answer that? What's the teacher doing right now?
Introducing us to our world.
Go ahead.
When you brought up the different cultures and you said this is this culture,
Mm-hmm.
is that an invitation for communication with the teacher?
Is what an invitation?
Instead of having that whatever the teacher or the guru says that I will do, is this culture more supportive for communication with the teacher?
Yeah, yes, I would say so. If you consider, the way I say it is, don't believe me, don't obey me, but you could consider it. You could consider when I say train your mind, I'm endeavoring to meet you where you're at. I'm not trying to convert you into Buddhism or anything for that matter. I'm just saying, you might want to find out what this is, this living being that all these living beings, whatever, 37 living beings, I guess, or more on Zoom, and another, what, 8 people in here, 9 if you count this person. You might want to consider finding out deeply what this is, not just believing in Buddhism or believing in the teacher. Now, both of my teachers taught totally, they were like nothing alike at all. You could not really, I mean, I saw them together a few times and they talked to each other somewhat. Their teaching style was radically different. And I'm nothing like either one of them, other than to say that I teach out of what I see, and I think they did too. But what they see and what or saw, or what I see, may not line up in the same way. Chunchu.
Question from Shane, Virginia.
Shane,
Can you trust the teacher's lies?
trust the teacher's lies. Shane, you always have been kind of peculiar. I think it's a lie. You shouldn't trust that if it's a lie. If the teacher's lying, I'm not sure what is there. If there's something else you want to know there, Shane, maybe you could rephrase your question or ask it in a different way. Didn't you?
Ginger bowing. You've said everything you say is a lie.
Oh.
So what is it that we are trusting if we do have some trust
Yeah.
in you?
But when I'm saying that, as I'm saying, you never can, as soon as you open your mouth, you can't speak ultimate truth. You might be able to, you might understand that and you might try to point to it, but everything you say is relative. It's a relative situation. So it's not that it's the conventional kind of I'm lying to people and not being genuine or honest with you. It's just that it's a relative situation. So you never can really point to what it is. This is why the teachers in ancient times, including the Tibetans, but quite a bit in Zen, would try to, like Dogen Zenji does, or other Zen teachers in the past would kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth in order to recommend to you that you look deeper into the situation rather than just a relative situation. Like the stone woman gets up dancing. The wooden man begins to sing. Well, wooden men don't sing. Stone women don't dance. So why would they say that? They just lied from the point of view of relative truth. But what they're endeavoring to do, using whatever images they can, and this was back in what, this is around 1100 years ago that this was, a teacher said this. The stone woman gets up dancing. The wooden man begins to sing. And it's meant to help you see more deeply into the nature of consciousness and the nature of identity. The stone woman is basically saying that the gets up dancing. It means that dancing happens, but there's no one there. It's a stone woman. There's no real entity or person there. So that's what is being recommended. That's what is being pointed at there. So you could say relatively, it doesn't happen. It's kind of a lie or an untruth. So the teaching person, he, she, or they might resort to that kind of a situation in a face-to-face relationship with a student, or possibly in a Dharma talk. So I would say, don't believe anything. Don't believe it, don't disbelieve it, and don't ignore it. And that way, your openness will show up in the way that it needs to, in order to align. You could say align with your true nature, so that you're not manipulated into something else, or into believing something or disbelieving something, which is the very nature of relative truth. Is it right and wrong, up and down, back and forth? We buy into that, and we try to make that work, make it squeeze some kind of happiness or truth out of that understanding, and it just doesn't work, because death comes without warning. this is not going to last. It might persist for a while, but fundamentally it ends. Everything ends. Everything that shows up ends. What doesn't end? Is there something that doesn't end? That which is not created, isn't created, doesn't go away. Find out. Question on Zoom?
Ondo bowing.
Go ahead, Ondo.
What did your dedication to Chogyam look like when you were starting out on the path bowing?
I was pretty terrified, but I'd been working with my mind. I've been reading about Buddhism for about 12 years, from 1960 until 1973. And when I read a couple of books by him, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism and Meditation in Action, I kind of realized that I was, even before I finished the book, I probably was going to have to talk to him. And those of you who've read or studied Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism see that the description of the nature of ego in there is pretty convincing. So you read that kind of a description of the nature of mind, and you're actually experiencing what is being described. You realize that somebody's talking about the way your mind works. So you might think, maybe I should talk to that guy, because everybody else you talk to is so tied up in knots of their own ideas and opinions and judgments and evaluations that you can't go that direction. You're not going to get any help there in that area. So my feeling about Ondo, regarding your question, my feeling about that, I was both terrified and knew I had to go talk to him. It was difficult to do that. So I was kind of very cowardly on the one hand. I didn't want to go, and also you might even say kind of brave, because I thought, I'm going to have to go do this. I just have to, no matter what happens, I've got to go talk to him. It was very difficult. I was only 32 years old or something like that. Pretty young considering. And further question about that, Ondo?
Ondo bowing, what was that about going to see him? That is dedication, bowing.
It was choiceless. I didn't make a choice about it. It's like it came up and I had to do that, in spite of the fear or the trepidation. It was difficult, but I had to do it. So I don't know how else to say it other than as choiceless. I didn't decide, say, well, should I go or shouldn't I go? I had to go. And I didn't really even want to tell anybody about it, because then I would have to tell them how frightened I was. And I was embarrassed about that. I mean, like, what am I embarrassed about? I'm just going to go talk to a guy about meditation just because he's a lama from Tibet. And he was fairly accessible. The other lamas from Tibet that I had met or seen, I wasn't about to approach any of them because they're too holy. They had robes and everything. Where this guy wore a sports shirt, smoked cigarettes, and drank sake. So I thought, I can approach him. He's not too terrifying. Well, he still was terrifying in spite of that, trying to, and I'm not saying he was trying, but he just was more ordinary looking. He wasn't so intimidating. Yet this book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, for those of you who've read that, it's a powerful book. We've been studying it for a long time. First started studying it in 1975 as a group, and have been doing that right up to and including yesterday? Studied it yesterday. Further? No?
Ondo bowing is facing your fear, dedication, bowing.
I don't think so. That what happened there was choiceless. I didn't decide to face my fear. I didn't decide. I couldn't help it. I mean, it was fearful, and had some trepidation. You know what I'm talking about, Ondo. I had some fear and some trepidation, but somehow the need to know the truth is more powerful than the fear. I felt like he could help me, just by reading the way he described the nature of ego and the nature of self-centeredness and narcissism, the structure of ego. I've got to just do it anyway. So it was choiceless. And just like quite often, not that have the kind of teaching or power that he had, of course, but still, if people that come this way towards this person, it's pretty choiceless. You don't really evaluate too much. You realize you need to do this, or you don't, or you do something else. I don't particularly advertise or promise anything, nor did he.
Shoga bowing.
Yes.
Semi has a question in the chat box.
Who does?
Semi?
Yeah.
How do I be with something that is based on fear?
Be afraid. Just be afraid. Who you are, who you actually are is not threatened. It just looks like it. This is where paranoia comes from. So this is why the path of meditation, whether you attain realization or not, you may not realize your true nature, but you will be, the whole idea of, you have a better understanding of how to work with fear and see that it's really, the fear is kind of a concoction of things. So just when it says the bodhisattva vows to be with all things, that's a pretty good place to start. Just when the fear comes up, don't cover it up. Don't blame anybody. Don't blame yourself. Don't do anything with it except just fear, just the texture of the fear. It's like feeling of a carpeting. It's just the texture of it. You don't abandon the texture of it to call it, oh, it's a rug, or it's rattan, or it's any kind of texture that you would name it in order to get back away from it. Just feel that fear. And also don't go the other way and rub your nose in it particularly and try to force yourself into it.
Shoga bowing. Semi has a follow-up question.
Sammy, go ahead.
What is fear made of?
So it is the reaction of that aspect of consciousness that has congealed or gotten together in some kind of a hub of separation. It thinks there is somebody who is afraid of something else, and that something else could be too much open space, too much closed space, agoraphobia, claustrophobia, any kind of control or any kind of threat that shows up can create that kind of fear of other. So this is what we're working with on the path of meditation, is trying to see, is there an other? What is this? The what question in some areas in therapies and other approaches to working with the mind, which have their own validity. I'm not here to say everybody should meditate. They shouldn't. I would say don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't have to meditate, don't meditate. Do something else. Difficult to do this. But so as far as the fear, it's fear of the unknown, fear of oblivion, fear of death, fear of the other situation. But if you realize your true nature, there isn't anything else. This is called Advaita, or non-duality, not two. The illusion of other beings and other things and other is just so incredibly powerful. But this is, as has been said, the dream you have at night is the sample dream. That's what shows you that it's a dream. You wake up, oh, that was unreal. Even though the things in it seem very real at the time, we grasped some things, we ran away from others, we enjoyed this, we didn't enjoy that, we were confused by this or that being that showed up, that personage, or even our own self coming and going, illusion. Then we wake up, and then we see that we had at night was a sample dream that shows us what a dream is. This is the real dream. This is the actual dream that you have to awaken from. This is the nature of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, or the Sanskrit for complete unexcelled awakening or enlightenment, or seeing the truth of reality. No one can give you that. No one can hand that to you, but someone who sees that, understands that, can point to it, but they can't give it to you.
Carl bowing. if I'm lost in a thought and I kind of snap out of it, then looking in hindsight, I can see clearly that that was an illusion. Is that a kind of awakening, or just go ahead?
The actual awakening is not an experience. If it is, it'll go away. This is an experience. Here's an experience. Gone. It's gone. It happened. It was sharp. It was immediate. And two things came together and caused something else, but it goes away. But awakening is not something that comes into experience. So therefore, it can't go away. Go ahead, John Roadhouse.
Thank you. What is it about awareness that seems to have the quality or the result of self-liberating fixed views?
Because fixed views get their sustenance and their nutrition from grasping, rejecting, or shutting down, the three poisons. And if awareness is just awareness is there, then there's no nutrition for that. So then it becomes self-liberated. No one does it. No one liberates anything. There isn't anyone. There isn't anyone to liberate anything. So that the way you phrase it there is a teaching way, a way of teaching this in such a way that someone can begin to see that just observe, just awareness itself of the forms coming and going. And you might say, take nothing personally. Yet if you do take it personally, don't take that personally. So don't double up with what Trungpa Rinpoche called in ancient times, 50 years ago, double negativity. The first negativity is negative enough. You remember that, John?
Yeah, negative negativity, he called it.
Yeah, he did. He did call it negative negativity. Being negative about negativity. And it's just like, it's almost as bad as positive positivity, but then you've got to be, who's that one guy that teaches positive? The power of positive shrinking, I think it is. The power of positive shrinking, yes. Wasn't that Ted Turner? No.
Dale Carnegie?
Dale Carnegie, yeah. And then his friend, Dale's friend, who was that one guy?
Norman Vincent Peale?
Yeah.
That's dating us.
That's what?
That's dating us.
No, I'm married. I can't date you.
So back to awareness. Speaking of Dale Carnegie and
oh darn, back to awareness again. Let's
speaking
go.
of Dale Carnegie and Norman Vincent Peale.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, the way that awareness, if you will, interfaces with fixed views from the point of view of self-liberation. So from that perspective, then there's no completion or finish to the awareness process, because there's always one more layer of the onion. Again, to cite something Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about, peeling an onion or wearing out a pair of shoes. So there's always some other dimension or aspect to which awareness could operate and have the quality of self-liberation. So it's not a one-off. Is that a correct understanding from your perspective?
Do you need my approval there, John?
Oh, I definitely do. Oh,
Okay, then I totally approve.
Yeah, it's just my impression,
Okay,
just in my own practice or working with my own mind, that the application of awareness is inexhaustible. So simply to say, oh, I'm aware of that, as if that's the end of the conversation, so to speak, is missing the point. So it seems.
so it seems. Thank you, John. Shut up.
Sure, Brian. If that process, like John's describing, is inexhaustible, What is unexcelled awakening?
Inexhaustible. You can't exhaust something that is, you can't exhaust something that doesn't have a source. And it doesn't have a source because it's not a relative situation. So it's inexhaustible. But we have to talk about it somewhat. A stone woman gets up dancing. We use those kind of metaphors in order to display this so that the self-centered mind, the ego mind, the suffering mind can actually have some kind of way of working with it. Just like we come in, we sit down, hold still, look at the wall. It's a very relative situation. It's called discipline. Shila Samadhi and Praja, or discipline, looking at the situation of samadhi and then seeing what it is, or wisdom that's not separate. More?
Sure. What's the difference between someone on the path who has things to see still and someone who's realized who has things to see still?
Someone who's realized doesn't see anything else. They don't see anything else. They always see themselves. They always see what this is. They just see this, but they don't ignore the relative situation either. So the relative situation, the absolute situation, here again, we come back to the same situation. It's just about impossible to construct with the thinking process. The relative, the absolute and the relative are not two different things. You don't have two things anywhere, including that one. So therefore, everything is preaching the Dharma all the time. Everything is saying not separate. If you wanted to use a conceptual interpretation of what you're looking at. If you see what this is, we won't have any questions about anything. May not have any answers. More?
Sure. If everything's preaching the Dharma, what's if we're unclear what's happening to that teaching by the time it gets to us?
The way you're working with it is so literal that it doesn't hold up for a response. So paraphrase yourself. Get closer to what you're actually wanting to know.
Shadow bowing, can that message break through the ego?
It's not separate from the ego. That's why it's so difficult, because that's why people think we need to get rid of our ego, or that's too egotistical, or we buy into that construct and thinking that's something we have to get rid of because it's seems to be going the wrong way when it's not separate from what you're looking for. Go ahead.
Shadow bowing. So is everyone receiving that teaching?
Yes, everybody's receiving it all the time, everywhere. They just add to it. That can't be right, or I think I got it, or some kind of a buying into the separation of the otherness and reinforcing that because of fear.
Shadow bowing. I know the personal example that shows up for me is when you say everything's preaching the Dharma, my comment is, well, it doesn't look that way to me. How will it look that way?
Maybe not. Listen, observe, just observe. If you just observe, the ego mind does not get any nutrition from that. But if you observe and you have a thought about it, like, well, it doesn't look like that way to me. You just told me, you just showed me your ignorance. And you would show me your ignorance, even if you said, I agree with them, no matter what you did with that. Don't add, don't subtract, don't divide, do no math at all. And the practice seems to be seeing the way we cannot really control that or stop it or start it or have any say so about it. Senchu.
Sensu bowing. Can we be with all things while while preoccupied with right and wrong?
Yes. If you're aware that you're preoccupied, then there isn't anything else to do. It's about awareness. It's not about fixing it or getting better. If you're preoccupied with right and wrong, and then that's the way all things are showing up. It's when you think that the preoccupation that some things are actually right and some things are actually wrong. So it's the addition. The preoccupation with right and wrong is just watching stuff come and go. Some things appear right, some things appear wrong. And self-centeredness wants some of that, but not that, and wants more of this, but less of that. So the preoccupation is just look at it. More? Chun-chu.
Question from Tom McCauley.
Tom?
Are you familiar with the headless way described by author Douglas Harding?
Yes.
Can it cultivate a level of awareness comparable to the awareness cultivated by Shikantaza?
Yeah, I don't know. I read that many years ago. On having no head. I think I mentioned that to somebody today, didn't
You mentioned it in my interview.
I? I did. So interesting that shows up at the same time. Did I ask you if you had a head, or if you were getting ahead or falling behind? You remember, Shoka?
Shobang, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't.
you were saying, talking about enlightenment as a description.
Well, there you have it. And Douglas Harding had an approach, which it's been so many years since I read it. So I can't respond to that. But I would say if that reading that book is inspiring to you or supports you in some way, then I would say I wouldn't deny that. I'd say that may be helpful to you since you're asking about it. It's just kind of coincidental that it came up an hour apart. Yes.
A question from Jethro in the UK. I see a lot of common ground in the core messages of Buddhism, Taoism, Christian mysticism, and Advaita Vedanta. But as soon as I go towards any one path, that grass is always greener syndrome raises its head. How do I discern which path to follow? Is it necessary to follow only one path?
It seems like you need to find something that works. Important thing for me was because I was reading all over the place back in the 60s, 1960s myself, until I met Trungpa Rinpoche. And then it was choiceless for me. But I was reading every direction. I was reading a lot. And so, but without a teacher, without a particular teacher, seems to be difficult. I don't know that say that can't be done. I'm not saying you can't read Christian mysticism and read Meister Eckhart and also read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and then also read Advaita teachings also. Maybe you could. You'll know. Tends to be kind of circular if you don't have something to basically give you some kind of a ballast so you can continue to look and see what this is for yourself. Reading that all that material is very, very interesting. I used to read that Shaken book by Meister Eckhart. I was reading that in the 60s, and I just read it over and over, and it's just wonderful to read. This great Christian mystic, Meister Eckhart. But it gets to be kind of entertaining reading about Advaita or reading about Taoism or even reading about Buddhism can do that also, unless you read the same book over and over again. Then it's not quite so entertaining.
Shokabang.
Okay.
Semi has a question in chat box.
I mean, go ahead.
Is being with all things and loving kindness the same thing?
I would say there's some equality happening there. Loving kindness, just giving everything the benefit of the doubt. Allow things to arise and pass away and arise and pass away. And eventually you see that which is observing, the observer quality of that is also what it is observing, it is not separate from. The elseness is gone, even though you still see things come and go, but you don't see anything moving that you don't recognize.
Kevin Bowing,
Kevin,
in terms of being with all things, would we work with the karma that we have coming to us differently than we might the karma we're making? Bowing.
The karma, the way I say this, the karma that is coming to us as our mind stream, or as someone walking in the door to our house, or whatever, some kind of interaction that's just happening in our life stream or our mind stream, insofar as you can, just receive it as it is. But then when we add on to it, then we tend to come out of our preference for one thing over something else, based on sometimes on hope and fear, and on all kinds of pretty much unsearchable or unsourceable energies that can come from everywhere. So less is better. Just allow your life to show up, and that way you won't miss your life. Whereas if you're operating out of some kind of selectivity, or I like this, but I don't like that. This is good. That's not so good. I'm not sure if I'm responding to your question in a way that's helpful to you. Yeah, if you have something further, I'd be happy to look at it.
I guess I just have an easier time of discerning karma I have coming to me when I'm in meditation practice versus in my life. But I guess maybe there's no difference.
Yeah. Well, that's also awareness. You're noticing there's a contrast there. It's about seeing the contrast. Notice when you're sitting practice, that's the practice of sharpening the awareness. And then when we get up, then we notice how dull our awareness is, which is also awareness. Seeing what something fundamentally is, even if it has a descriptor or a descriptive, it's still awareness. So if you see your true nature, if you realize it 10 minutes before then, it's probably going to feel pretty hopeless, because you've been looking and looking and looking and looking. Just about, as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, ego is like walking on a shoe. You just have to keep walking on it until it wears out. What wears out is your belief that it's real. You just keep going and going, and it can be difficult, it can be challenging, and it can be unrewarding in the conventional sense of kind of getting somewhere. I'm on the 7th bhumi now. Even when Trungpa Rinpoche in 1973, when he was at he was talking about the bhumis, I think in 73 and 74 transcripts, he said, someone says, so Rinpoche, what bhumi, I have to paraphrase a little bit, what bhumi are you on? And he said, Teton bhumi. So, which showed you what he wasn't about to tell you, that he was on the 8th bhumi or the 9th bhumi or 10th bhumi, or it transcended all the bhumis and was now a Buddha. Instead, he kind of made a joke out of it. So isn't it interesting that we talk about all those bhumis, but you can't, if you ask a Dharma teacher, they may make a joke out of it. If you ask me, I would say I have no idea. I don't even know how I don't even give talks to the bhumis. I have my student monks give talks to the bhumis. A lot easier. Anything else? One more question, and then we're all going to go out and have a beer. No.
Jason Bowing.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Yes, there appears to be a delay between a thing that happens and our awareness of it. Is there an importance in that delay between those?
If that's what you're picking up, don't do anything with it. I mean, you commented already that it's a delay, but just look at it. Just continue to look at it. Don't transfer that to something else. Just whatever it is, that's it. Whatever it is, that's it. If you just look at it, then if you are looking at something that is unreal, it will begin to reveal itself. But it's unlikely to reveal itself if you or me or anybody are meddling with that and judging it or moving it aside or making it brighter or more dull or less relevant or or has too much delay, too little delay, not enough delay. Any kind of commentary on it comes out of objecting, agreeing, or ignoring. Those are the three poisons. Do nothing with it except what? Receive it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question, Jason. So we can dedicate to merit. So, and here in the monastery, someone will go and lead the dedication of merit.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together realize the Buddha's way. Son. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, the great prajna, paramita. O Buddhas and bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, its buildings, gardens, and all adjoining areas from any and all dark or negative energy. Remove and dissolve any negative energy or devices. Fill everything and everyone with light. Please shield and protect with light our teachers, monks, students, and all practitioners of the Dharma, our families and friends from negative forces and energy from now on. Help us to realize the truth of the Buddha's teachings.